Hey, squirrel listeners! I thought I'd start earlier in the day before I get off. There's hardly any time when I'm not like that, though. Oh my God. Okay, the last thing I read, this is chapter 11, part 2, had the impertinence to wear it before my face. I forbid it, and she left, of course, which made Papa so cross he wouldn't give me the camel's hair shawl he promised this year. It's perfectly shameful, said Miss Perkins, as Trix paused out of breath. Servants ought to be made to dress like servants as they do abroad, then we should have no more trouble, observed Miss Perkins, who had just made the grand tour and had brought home a French maid. Perky don't practice as much as she preaches, whispered Belle to Polly as Miss P became absorbed in the chat of her other neighbors. She pays her chamber girl with old finery, and the other day when Betsy was out parading in her Mrs. cast-off purple plush suit, Mr. Curtis thought she was Mademoiselle and bowed to her. He's as blind as a bat, but recognized the dress and pulled off his hat to it in the most elegant style. Perky adores him and was mad enough to beat Betsy when she told the story and giggled over it. Betsy's quite as stylish and ever so much prettier than Perky, and she knows it, which is aggravation. Polly couldn't help laughing, but grew sober a minute after as Trix said pettishly, Well, I'm sick of hearing about beggars. I believe half of them are humbugs, and if we let them alone, they'd go to work and take care of themselves. There's altogether too much fuss made about charity. I do wish we could be left in peace. There can't be too much charity, burst out Polly, forgetting her shyness all at once. Oh, indeed. Well, I take the liberty to differ from you, returned Trix, putting up her glass and bestowing upon Polly her most top-loftical stare, as the girls called it. I regret to say that Polly never could talk with or be near Trix without feeling irritated and combative. She tried to conquer this feeling, but she couldn't, and when Trix put on airs, Polly felt an intense desire to box her ears. You go, Polly. That eyeglass was her especial aversion, for Trix was no more nearsighted than herself, but pretended to be because it was the fashion, and at times used the innocent glass as a weapon with which to put down anyone who presumed to set themselves up. The supercilious glance which accompanied her ironically polite speech roused Polly, who answered with sudden color and the kindling of the eyes that always betrayed a perturbed spirit. I don't think many of us would enjoy that selfish sort of peace while little children starve and girls no older than us kill themselves because their dreadful poverty leaves them no choice but sin or death. A sudden lull took place, for though Polly did not raise her voice, it was full of indignant emotion, and the most frivolous girl there felt a little thrill of sympathy, for the most utterly fashionable life does not kill the heart out of women, till years of selfish pleasure have passed over their heads. Trix was ashamed of herself, but she felt the same antagonism toward Polly that Polly did toward her, and being less generous took satisfaction in plaguing her. Polly did not know that the secret of this was the fact that Tom often held her up as a model for his fiancée to follow, which caused that young lady to dislike her more than ever. Half the awful stories in the papers are made up for sensation, and it's absurd to believe them unless one likes to be harrowed up. I don't. And as for peace, I'm not likely to get much while I have Tom to look after, said Trix with an aggravating laugh. Polly's needle snapped in two, but she did not mind it as she said with a look that silenced even sharp-tongued Trix, I can't help believing what my own eyes and ears have seen and heard. You lead such safe and happy lives you can't imagine the misery that is all around you. But if you could get a glimpse of it, it would make your hearts ache as it has mine. Do you suffer from heartache? Someone hinted as much to me, but you looked so well I couldn't believe it. Now that was cruel in Trix. more cruel than anyone guessed, but girls' tongues can deal wounds as sharp and sudden as the slender stilettos Spanish women wear in their hair. And Polly turned pale as those words stabbed her. Belle saw it and rushed to the rescue with more goodwill than wisdom. Nobody ever accused you of having any heart to ache with. Polly and I are not old enough yet to get tough and cool, and we are still silly enough to pity unhappy people. Tom Shaw especially, added Belle under her breath. That was a two-edged thrust, for Trix was decidedly an old girl, and Tom was generally regarded as a hapless victim. Trix turned red, but before she could load and fire again, Emma Davenport, who labored under the delusion that this sort of skirmishing was ill-natured and therefore ill-bred, spoke up in her pleasant way. Speaking of pitying the poor, I always wonder why it is that we all like to read and cry over their troubles in books. But when we have the real thing before us, we think it's uninteresting and disagreeable. It's the genius that gets into the books which makes us like the poverty, I fancy, but I don't quite agree that the real thing isn't interesting. I think it would be if we knew how to look at it and feel it, said Polly very quietly. She pushed her chair out of the arctic circle of Miss Perkins into the temperate one of the friendly Emma. But how shall we learn that? I don't see what we girls can do more than we do now. We haven't much money for such things, shouldn't know how to use it if we had. And it isn't proper for us to go poking into dirty places to hunt up the needy. Going about doing good in pony phaetons, as somebody says, may succeed in England, but it won't work here, said Fanny, who had begun lately to think a good deal of someone beside herself, and so found her interest in her fellow beings increasing daily. We can't do much, perhaps, just yet, but still there are things left undone that naturally fall to us. I know a house, said Polly, sewing busily as she talked, where every servant who enters it becomes an object of interest to the mistress and her daughters. These women are taught good habits. Books are put where they can get them. Sensible amusements are planned for them sometimes, and soon they feel they're not considered mere scrubs to do as much work as possible for as little money as possible, but helpers in the family who are loved and respected in proportion to their faithfulness. This lady feels her duty to them, owns it, and does it as conscientiously as she wants them to do theirs by her. And that is the way it ought to be, I think. As Polly paused, several keen eyes discovered that Emma's cheeks were very red, and saw a smile lurking in the corners of the mouth that tried to look demure, which told them who Polly meant. Do the biddies all turn out saints in that well-regulated family? Asked the irrepressible Trix. No, few of us do that, even in the parlor, but every one of the biddies is better for being there, whether they are grateful or not. I ought not to have mentioned this, perhaps, but I wanted to show you one thing that we girls can do. We all complain about bad servants, most as much if we were housekeepers ourselves, but it never occurs to us to try and mend the matter by getting up a better spirit between mistress and maid. Then there's another thing we can do, added Polly, warming up. Most of us find money enough for our little vanities and pleasures, but feel dreadfully poor when we come to pay for work, sewing especially. Couldn't we give up a few of the vanities and pay the seamstresses better? I declare I will, cried Belle, whose conscience suddenly woke and smote her for beating down the woman who did her plain sewing in order that she might have an extra flounce on a new dress. Belle has got a virtuous fit. Pity it won't last a week, said Trix. Wait and see, retorted Belle, resolving that it should last, just to disappoint that spiteful minx, as she sweetly called her old schoolmate. Now we shall behold Belle galloping away at a great pace on her new hobby. I shouldn't be surprised to hear of her preaching in the jail adopting a nice dirty little orphan or passing round tracts at a woman's rights meeting, said Trix, who never could forgive Belle for having a lovely complexion and so much hair of her own that she never patronized either rats, mice, waterfall switches, or puff combs. Well, I might do worse, and I think of the two, I'd rather amuse myself so than as some young ladies do who get into the papers for their pranks, returned Belle with a moral air. Suppose we have a little recess and rest while Polly plays to us, will you, Polly? It will do us good. They all want to hear you, and begged I'd ask. Then I will, with pleasure, said Polly, who went to the piano with such obliging readiness that several reproachful glances fell upon Trix, who didn't need her glass to see them. Polly was never too sad, perturbed, or lazy to sing, for it was almost as easy to her as breathing, and seemed the most natural outlet for her emotions. For a minute her hands wandered over the keys as if uncertain what to play. Then, falling into a sad, sweet strain, she sang the Bridge of Sighs. Polly didn't know why she chose it, but the instinct seemed to have been a true one, for as old as the song was, it went straight to the hearts of the hearers, and Polly sung it better than she ever had before. For now the memory of little Jane lent it a tender pathos which no art could give. It did them all good, for music is a beautiful magician, and few can resist its power. The girls were touched by the appeal. Polly was lifted out of herself, and when she turned round, the softened look on all the faces told her that for a moment foolish differences and frivolous beliefs were forgotten in the one womanly sentiment of pity for the wrongs and woes of which the listeners' happy lives were ignorant. That song always makes me cry and feel as if I have no right to be so comfortable, said Belle, openly wiping her eyes on a crash towel. Fortunately, such cases are very rare, said another young lady who seldom read the newspapers. I wish they were, but I'm afraid they are not, for only 3 weeks ago I saw a girl younger than any of us, and no worse, who tried to destroy herself simply because she was so discouraged, sick, and poor, said Polly. Do tell about her, cried Belle eagerly. Feeling that the song had paved the way for the story and given her courage to tell it, Polly did tell it, and must have done it well, for the girls stopped work to listen. And when she ended, other eyes beside warm-hearted Belle's were wet, besides, I guess. Trix looked quite subdued. Miss Perkins thawed to such a degree that something glittered on her hand as she bent over the pink pinafore again, better and brighter than her biggest diamond. Emma got up and went to Polly with a face full of affectionate respect, while Fanny, moved by a sudden impulse, caught up a costly some kind of plate that stood on the etagere, and laying a $5 bill on it, passed it round, quoting Polly's words. Girls, I know you'll like to help poor little Jenny begin again and do better this time. It was good to see how quickly the pretty purses were out, how generously each gave of its abundance, and what hearty applause broke from the girls as Belle laid down her golden thimble, saying with an April face, There, take that. I never have any money. Somehow it won't stay with me, but I can't let the plate pass me this time. When Fanny brought the contributions to Polly, she just gathered it up in her two... Oh, my nose itches. Gathered it up. Where was I? In her two hands with such a glad and grateful face, the girls wished they had more to give. I can't thank you enough, she said with an eloquent little choke in her voice. This will help Jenny very much, but the way in which it was done will do her more good than double the money, because it will prove to her that she isn't without friends, and make her feel that there is a place in the world for her. Let her work for you in return for this. She don't ask alms, she only wants employment and a little kindness, and the best charity we can bestow is to see that she has both. I'll give her as much sewing as she wants, and she can stay at our house while she does it if she needs a home," said Trix in a spasm of benevolence. "She doesn't need a home, thank you. Miss Mills has given half of hers, and considers Jane her child," answered Polly, with proud satisfaction in the fact. "What an old dear!" cried Belle. "I want to know her, may I?" whispered Emma. "Oh, yes. I'm glad to make her known to anyone. She's a quiet little old lady, but she does one heaps of good, and shows you how to be charitable in the wisest way. Do tell us about it. I'm sure I want to do my duty, but it's such a muddle I don't know how," said Belle. Then quite naturally the conversation fell upon the great work that none should be too busy to think of, and which few are too young or too poor to help on with their might. The faces grew more earnest, the fingers flew faster as the quick young hearts and brains took in the new facts, ideas and plans that grew out of the true stories, the sensible hints, the successful efforts which Polly told them, fresh from the lips of Miss Mills, for of late Polly had talked much with the good lady, and learned quickly the lessons her unselfish life conveyed. The girls found this more interesting than gossip, partly owing to its novelty, doubtless, but the enthusiasm was sincere while it lasted and did them good. Many of them forgot all about it in a week, but Polly's effort was not lost, for Emma, Belle, and Fanny remained firm friends to Jane, so kindly helping her that the poor child felt as if she had indeed been born again into a new and happy world. Not till long afterward did Polly see how much good this little effort had done her, for the first small sacrifice of this sort leads the way to others, and a single hand's turn given heartily to the world's great work helps one amazingly with one's own small task. Polly found this out as her life slowly grew easier and brighter, and the beautiful law of compensation gave her better purposes and pleasures than any she had lost. The parents of some of her pupils were persons of real refinement, and such are always quick to perceive the marks of culture in others, no matter where they find them. These, attracted first by Polly's cheerful face, modest manners, and faithful work, soon found in her something more than good teacher. They found a real talent for music, an eager desire for helpful opportunities, and a heart grateful for the kindly sympathy that makes rough places smooth. Fortunately, those who have the skill to detect these traits also possess the spirits to appreciate, and often the power to serve and develop them, in ways so delicate that the most sensitive pride could not resent the favor. These true gentlefolk showed Polly their respect and regard, but put many pleasures in her way, and when they paid her for her work, gave her also the hearty thanks that takes away all sense of degradation, even from the humblest service. For money so earned and paid sweetens the daily bread it buys, and makes the mutual obligation a mutual benefit and pleasure. A few such patrons did much for Polly, and the music she gave them for an undertone of gratitude that left blithe echoes in those great houses which money could not buy. Then, as her butterfly acquaintances deserted her, she found her way into a hive of friendly bees who welcomed her and showed her how to find the honey that keeps life sweet and wholesome. Though Miss Mills, who was the counselor and comforter of several, Polly came to know a little sisterhood of busy, happy, independent girls, who each had a purpose to execute, a talent to develop, an ambition to achieve, and brought to work patience and perseverance, hope and courage. Here Polly found her place at once, for in this little world love and liberty prevailed. Talent, energy, and character took first rank. Money, fashion, and position were literally nowhere, for here, as in the big world outside, genius seemed to blossom best when poverty was head gardener. Young teachers doing much work for little pay, young artists trying to pencil, paint, or carve their way to Rome, young writers burning to distinguish themselves, young singers dreaming of triumphs great as those of Jenny Lind, and some who tried to conquer independence armed only with a needle like poor Jane. All these helped Polly as unconsciously as she helped them, for purpose and principle are the best teachers we can have, and the one of them makes half the women of America what they are: restless, aimless, frivolous, and sick. To outsiders, that was a very hard-working and uneventful winter to Polly. She thought so herself, but as spring came on, the seed of new virtues, planted in the winter time, and ripened by the sunshine of endeavor, began to bud in Polly's nature, betraying their presence to others by the added strength and sweetness of her character long before she herself discovered these mayflowers that had blossomed for her underneath the snow. Ta-da! End of 11. And chapter 12 is called Forbidden Fruit. Ho ho! I hope you enjoyed that. I'm so tickled we got it read. Bookmark. Okay. Well, see you tomorrow, live at 5. Love ya. Be sweet, don't be ugly. Bye-bye.